Today, our recap tells the story of how our protagonist became a miserable unemployed person. It all starts in a school, where the teacher praises a student, saying they spoke very well. Next, he calls on the next student, Minji. Minji then says that, in short, when he grows up, he will become the president. His classmates laugh, asking how he would do that. Then, Minji says it's none of their business. But the teacher interrupts the discussion, asking them to stop fighting, and tells him that when he becomes president, to remember to raise teachers' salaries. Then, looking at the list, the teacher calls on the next student, Shishi. Shishi quickly stands up and prepares to answer. Next, she says that her dream is to become someone very cool when she grows up, and says that she will work hard like her parents. Soon after, hiding her face with the sheet of paper, she says that she will eat everything she wants and more. And well, years later, there she was, throwing her controller on the floor, yelling that she lost again. Irritated, she asks if her teammates have no brains. Next, she grabs a tissue and, sighing, starts to clean up the liquid she spilled. She wonders why she keeps finding clueless teammates. Next, she throws the trash in a bag, and lying in her bed, she complains that playing every day has already tired her out, and wonders if there isn't anything more interesting to do. Then, Wu Shushu realizes that the garbage is piling up in her rented room, and even says that it's disgusting, and wonders how a normal person can live in a place like that, comparing her room to a pigsty. Except for sleeping, she spends her time playing games. Soon she cackles while playing and says that she got her enemies, warning her opponents that they have a minute and 30 seconds to die from poison. Next, she crosses her legs and, distant from reality, smiles while playing, but this time on her cell phone. A short time later, she starts scrolling through social media, and laughing, she says that it's very funny. In short, she is an idle person who just lies around all day. Soon her stomach rumbles and she complains that it's feeling uncomfortable, remembering that she hasn't eaten anything all day and wondering if she should make something to eat. Next, she goes to the kitchen and thoughtfully wonders if she forgot to wash the dishes. Then, with her hand on her chin, she states that if that's the case, there's still another way. Soon she grabs instant noodles and puts them directly into the cup, and then pours hot water over them to eat, justifying that this way she doesn't need to use a pot or wash the dishes. Shortly after, she finishes eating, and then drinks a glass of water to relax. And as soon as she finishes the water, she takes the opportunity to have a cup of hot coffee and slams the cup on the table. Satisfied, she says that this is the dream life, and burps. Soon she closes the instant noodles, saying that she is now satisfied and that this is the perfect time to play again. And while playing frantically, she states that the feeling is wonderful. Meanwhile, in the game, Shushu crawls in the grass behind a tree, observing that there is only one person left besides her. Determined, she says that she needs to focus all her attention, and moving the mouse and clicking frantically, she states that if she wins that round, she will play the recording at her funeral. Shortly after, her expression changes drastically from happiness to despair, as she wonders what happened. In disbelief, she exclaims that this couldn't be happening and gets irritated, complaining that she can no longer hear the game sounds. Annoyed, she justifies that she wasn't using headphones because they hurt, but soon wonders if she should put them on. And after reflecting, she decides that she couldn't use them, as she needs to be completely focused on the game. A short time later, her character dies unexpectedly, and well, Shisha quickly raises her arms, dissatisfied with her terrible result, and curses while banging hard on the table. Due to the force of the impact, the rest of the noodles fall to the floor, splashing the liquid everywhere, including on Shushu's face, who watches everything in shock. Next, she tries to clean up the mess, complaining that the stains won't come out no matter how much she cleans, and wonders if she will have to pay for it later. Soon, she worries about the possibility of her mother finding out and scolding her. Then, Shisha tries to clean the stains on the wall, but soon realizes it's not working. Even knowing this, she decides to try with more willpower, climbing on top of the computer table right after. Angrily, she states that she will make the wall feel something, and starts scrubbing harder and faster. Shisha screams completely out of her mind. That year, our protagonist was exactly 26 years old, and had been unemployed for 2 years. Then, she starts cursing and making fun of the wall while laughing non-stop. Given all this, could Wu Shisha be fit to become an adult? Then laughing, she states that she is satisfied and says it's time to get down. But when she tries, she slips. Now, on the street, a truck stops in front of the house. A delivery man climbs the stairs with a box in his arms and carefully places it in front of her door. Next, he starts calling her while knocking on the door of her apartment 303. And while taking off his gloves, he complains that this person is never home. Then, he starts to walk away. Shortly after, footsteps are heard in the apartment hallway. Shushu, hidden behind the door, wonders if the delivery man has left. Yes, she pretends not to be home whenever someone comes to her house. Then, she approaches the box, silently, and drags it into her house. Upon opening the box, she finds various food items packed with ice. But soon she complains that her mother didn't need to do that for her and justifies herself by stating that she had already told her not to send any more food. Shusher then decides to check what's inside the box, wondering why there's so much food. Upon opening, she realizes it's spicy shredded squid and states that it looks delicious and that she's already loving it. Next, she grabs another package wondering what it is, and upon opening, she realizes it's quite heavy and deduces that it's roast beef. Soon after, she picks up another package, and upon opening, she makes a disgusted face when she realizes it's fried seaweed. Then Shisha says that she will put the box in the refrigerator and organize it later, and starts to carefully carry the box to the kitchen. But upon opening the refrigerator, she realizes it's full and complains that there is no more space to put the box. Then, Shisha decides to empty the refrigerator a bit, complaining that it's full of things and wondering why there are so many things inside. Soon, she throws away something she calls an artifact, wondering how long that thing has been stored in there. Next, she bends down to pick up a glass of coffee and a packet of ketchup. Soon after, she grabs a box of homemade cheese and a few other things, along with a package of noodles. Then she observes all that empty space in her refrigerator and smiles in amazement. And happy, Shusha finds her cell phone charger that had been lost for years. Next, she finishes organizing everything. But when she turns to the other side, she thinks that if she wants to throw all those things away, she will have to use the sink, but soon complains that there are a lot of dirty dishes that she hasn't washed. Then, resigned, she starts washing the dishes, putting the leftovers down the drain, and states that sooner or later it will be over. Soon, Shisha is startled by the state of the sink, and complaining about the bad smell, says she will suffocate if she continues to smell that odor for another 5 minutes. Next, she grabs what appears to be the last dirty container, but wonders what is inside a nylon bag. And looking from the bottom up, she comes across a bizarre purple goo. Shisha then wonders if it's food. Then, she decides to smell it a little, and well, she makes a disgusted face and curses, telling that demon to burn in hell, while throwing that thing in the sink. She states that her mother sent her all kinds of food, but since she found it a bit boring, she only ate instant noodles or ordered food and completely forgot about the existence of those foods. Then, Shusher puts on gloves and states that this month she will have to reduce the frequency with which she orders food, and says that first, she will eat everything her mother sent her, justifying that eating healthy can save money. Then, she starts washing the dishes, and after a long day of housework, night arrives. Shusha laments how time flies and complains about being hungry. Then, she says that she needs to eat something worthwhile and opens the refrigerator, quickly choosing the spicy, shredded squid. Next, she thinks about getting a coffee to drink after she finishes eating. Shortly after, she complains about the fried seaweed, saying that when she tried it, she thought it had no taste, but soon admits that she thought it was good. At dusk, the time when many people finish a busy day at work and return home, our protagonist remains sleeping in her bed. This is Wu Shi. She is 26 years old, is looking for a job, and lives with inverted day and night cycles. Suddenly, she wakes up and says she needs to go to the bathroom. Soon after, she stretches and yawns. Next, complaining of sleepiness, she asks if she's like this because she didn't sleep well, and checking the time on her cell phone, she realizes it's already 6:30. Then she remembers that the day before she played until late and slept around 4 in the morning. And doing the math, she realizes that she slept 14 hours straight. But suddenly, with considerable mental delay, she is startled to finally realize that it was already 6:30 in the morning, and starts running desperately. Shortly after, Shusher sits in her chair, relieved to have escaped a big problem. And then, she receives a reward, a propeller hat, and says that the hat is very cute, deciding to keep it in her treasure chest. Next, Shusher wonders if she should also do the mission. And then, she starts playing. And well, after a few hours of playing like a worm, Shusher complains of back pain. Then she slumps down further in her chair and says that she feels at peace, as if she is being filled. Next, she complains that RPG games don't have the same dynamics as fighting games and curses her opponent, challenging him to show up at her house, stating that it doesn't drain her spirit and leaves them in years of silence. In the game, her character with the name Help Me Clean Up encounters someone with the name Jinfuzi's 97-year-old grandma's last fireball, who claims that this is her place and asks her to leave immediately. Then, the elf says that if she doesn't leave, she will kill her, but soon she is crushed with a hammer punch from our protagonist. Soon, she mocks her opponent, stating that she fell perfectly into the trap and asks, sarcastically, if she is still begging her to leave while mocking, saying that she is no match for her. Then, the opponent curses her, calling her an idiot, and angrily declares that she should wait because she will kill her sooner or later. But Shisha brags, telling her to come if she has the courage, as she no longer wants to live much longer. Laughing, she comments that the game that day is really exciting. Shortly after, she types frantically on her keyboard. Then, she is astonished and says that this is incredible incredible, exclaiming that this is the super rare dwarf monster whose money bag drops many gold coins, and states that if she catches it and sells it, she will have enough to buy 2 fried chickens, and declares that it is definitely her turn to turn things around. Then, she tries to catch it, but soon she is astonished, wondering what happened, and her opponent mocks her, asking if she can't catch her and taunts, saying that 50,000 gold coins were stolen from her. Sure then tells her to spit it all out to her, while her opponent says that even if she kills her, the gold coins will not come back. Our protagonist complains that 50,000 gold coins are almost her entire fortune. Meanwhile, her opponent asks if she turned on the camera because she can see her face all twisted with rage, and says that even if she kills monsters for 100 or 1,000 days, she won't find what she lost, and still mocks her, saying that even though she is pretending to be fine, her head should be boiling with rage, wondering if she is trying to contribute to global warming, calling her a walking kettle, mocking that if you crack an egg on her head, it will be fried in just 10 seconds. Then she starts laughing non-stop. Shortly after, she continues to mock Shushi, saying that when she boils water for noodles, she spits in the bowl, calling her a walking kettle. Then Shushi, or rather, help me clean up, says that she needs to manage her 2 tenants, and therefore is leaving the game, thanking everyone for their effort and saying goodbye. But before she leaves, the other idiot comments that running 2 games at the same time will get her account banned, and advises her to close the owner's game soon, but Shisha clicks confirm and exits the game. Shortly after, she wonders if those 2 were so angry with her that they started rambling. Shisha then says that it's just another death in a game, and still mocks them for bringing a friend, calling them childish. Next, she stretches, saying that this is not a game for children, and calls them idiots for being adults and not having any shame, and says that that day she needs to sleep early to adjust her messed up sleep schedule, and thinks that just thinking about it, she has already gained a lot. Next, Shisha lies down and covers herself, but soon jumps out of bed furious, screaming and asking if those 2 really think they won, and goes back to playing. Then, writing in a notepad, Shisha curses her opponents as bastards for bringing a friend after being defeated by her, calling them idiots for not causing any damage, and still says that talking to someone with a low IQ like theirs is a waste of her life, and threatens them, saying that if they continue living like that, the end of their lives is already in sight. Then, she copies the text, and sends it to her opponent in the game chat. Next, she turns off the computer before her opponent can respond. Then, exhausted, Shur stretches as she gets up from the chair, yelling that she won, and covering herself, she says that she feels like she has finally coughed up phlegm that has been stuck for 10 years, and can now sleep well. The next day at dusk, Shur wakes up, but when she tries to enter the game, she discovers that her account has been banned for 7 days for insulting players and uncivilized behavior. Then, our protagonist kneels and looks at the computer screen desolately, lamenting what happened. Shortly after, she receives a message from the game, saying that the appeal she sent regarding the punishment has been noted, but that, according to the regulations, they cannot lift the ban, and ask her to contact customer service if she has any further questions. Then, Shusha sends a message introducing herself and saying that she is not in a good mood that day. Soon, she complains that the pain is unbearable and that only fried chicken can soothe her pain, and orders a fried chicken combo, but complains that the delivery fee is also very expensive. Next, she checks her balance and despairs when she realizes that she only has 20,000 won left, the equivalent of 60 yuan, and laments that she won't have any money to spend until next week, wondering how she will survive a week with so little money. And angrily, she curses those 2 for getting her account blocked, because otherwise, she could have survived a little longer by selling gold, but reflects that she doesn't need to worry if her mother needs money. Next, Shusha calls her mother, asking if she is free, and says that she is out of money. But her mother scolds her for spending all the money so quickly, calling her a black hole. She questions her age, and criticizes her inability to earn money or at least save, comparing her to a tornado for spending as fast as one. Then, Shishir asks her to stop talking and complains that she has been scolding her for 2 minutes. And after this scolding, she hangs up the call and starts thinking about what she will do next week. And while raising and lowering her feet, she thinks about how she can save on her expenses. Then, she decides that she will cook at home to avoid going to convenience stores and not ordering takeout. But soon, she admits that she can't resist coffee. Soon, she starts researching something on her computer, and after a long time, lying in her bed, Shishir is surprised to remember that she got a subscription to a video website, and worries because the renewal deadline would be the day after tomorrow, and the monthly cost is 10,000. But as she quickly gets up, she states that she can still watch videos even without paying the subscription renewal fee. Then, she decides to cancel the renewal for now, and thinks about renewing it again after getting some money, stating that this is a smart idea. And while wiggling her feet up and down, sitting on the floor, the crazy woman wonders if she is a genius. Meanwhile, 2 cats fight near the the garbage on that same street. Shusha complains about the noise and asks if those people never get tired. Meanwhile, a blonde man sings on her screen, saying that hitting is kissing, cursing is loving, and that he will show how much he loves. Shusha laughs at the video, but soon she is startled by a noise, trying to understand what it is, questioning if it is the sound of a video, and at that moment, 2 level 10 police officers appear running on the screen, confirming her suspicion. Then, Shusha remembers that this is the day her subscription expires, and complains that it is an advertisement. Shortly after, a level 1 thief runs away with a briefcase, while the police chase him. Suddenly, a level 30 boss appears and laughs. With that, Shusha wonders what the hell that crazy ad is, and what it's trying to sell. And while washing the dishes, the crazy woman starts laughing at the random ads that appear. Then, a 2-minute ad appears on her screen. Next, a new ad appears in which 2 women face each other, while the user is asked which one to choose, with the options, marry her or hit her. But now, our protagonist starts complaining about the ads, and shaking with frustration, she drops one of the plates into the sink, wondering why an ad appears when nothing is happening. Then, exhausted, Shisha throws herself on her bed, and complains that since her account has been blocked, she would have to do something other than play games, stating that she will watch a movie recap. Now, lying in her bed, Shishu watches a video on her cell phone. Soon, a 5-minute ad appears, showing a boxer throwing a punch. Irritated, she complains about another ad, but resigned, she decides to see what the ad is this time. The ad shows a knight facing a minotaur in a puzzle game. Then, she starts analyzing the game, saying that at first glance, it's obvious that you need to move that out of the way to make the monster fall, and then lift the right key to get the treasure. And laughing, she states that it's simple. But when she tries to play, her character dies. And hooked by the ad, she wonders what the name of the game is, and soon finds it. Shisha then says that annoying ad made her a little curious about the puzzle game, wondering if she should download it and try it out. Impressed, Shusha exclaims that move was incredible, and realizes that it's not even a puzzle game. Next, she criticizes the ad, comparing it to the images on the packaging of convenience store hamburgers. Thoughtful, Shusha crosses her fingers, and hesitates when she sees the value of the ZooTube Premium subscription, which costs 10 yuan per month, with a renewal deadline of April 30th, 2023. Then, she thinks that if she stops drinking 2 cups of coffee, she will be able to pay for the subscription, concluding that it's no big deal to go without coffee for a little while. Shortly after, she states that now there will be no more ads, and says that in the end, she still succumbed to capitalism. And while watching a video, Shushu laughs and says that it's very funny. Shortly after, she thinks that if the money runs out, she will worry about it when the time comes. Then, she sighs while eating instant noodles in her messy room. And meanwhile, a cat meows in the background. Surprised, she wonders why a cat video appeared on her screen, and the reason why it was recommended to her, since she never searched for cat videos. Then she thinks it might be because she watched a compilation of funny animal videos. Next, Shushu watches the video, in which a cat knocks something over on a table. Then, she complains and asks what's so cute about that, and even curses, saying that all it does is mess up the whole house, sleep all day, eat all the food, and jump into pots. She claims that if something like that appeared in her house, she would get rid of it immediately. Then she stops and starts thinking about her own situation. Shortly after, she sits down and says that just eating instant noodles seems a bit boring, and says that at that moment, a cup of coffee would be really wonderful. Next, Shusha burps upon receiving a notification from her bank, which informs her that almost all her money has been deducted from various supermarkets over the month, leaving her practically broke. A short time later, Shushu walks down the street while complaining that she really can't live without coffee. After all, it's the only joy in her life, claiming that coffee runs through her veins. Sighing, Shusha complains that the morning sun shines too brightly in her eyes. Suddenly, she hears cat meows. Shortly after, some cats corner another cat that just wags its tail while trying to defend itself. Irritated, Shusha complains that she can't take it anymore, as those cats are always fighting, and even complains that every day they tear up the garbage bags and at night they start meowing, and says that as soon as they see someone, they run like crazy, claiming that she really doesn't want to see them. Then they move in to attack the poor black kitten, but our protagonist, still with a bit of clarity, is moved and shouts for them to go away, shooing them far away. Next, Shisha says that now they know how tough she is, and challenges them, asking if they dare to show off in her territory, claiming that there's only death for them there. Soon, the black kitten approaches her. Shortly after, she turns around and, looking at it, says that the cat seems very depressed. The cat then meows, but Shishu tells it not to come near her, but the cat rubs against her leg. Shishu then wonders what to do, and thinks about trying to pet it. But quickly, the cat starts walking in the opposite direction. Our protagonist then curses the cat. After that, she says she was planning to buy a cup of coffee, but when she saw the buy two get one free promotion for rice cakes, she spent all the money she had left and complains that her balance is 200 yuan and that she's broke again. Soon, she wonders if there's anyone more familiar with bankruptcy than her. Then, she thinks about whether she should ask her mother for more money. But then, she comes across the same cat as before. Shusha laughs. But soon, she turns her back to it. The cat then meows, trembling with fear. Shusha says it's not running away this time. Then, she thinks that, remembering the video she watched earlier, cats seem to like being petted on their butt. So she starts petting the cat. With that, the cat lies down on the ground and starts meowing. Shusha is surprised by its reaction. Next, she starts imagining various situations with the cat, like playing with it, taking photos, and sleeping cuddled up with it. But soon she returns to reality, still crouched beside the cat. Then, Shisha says it's kinda cute and asks if it would like to eat what she bought. She says she bought it for herself, but will share a bit with it. After all, she has to eat, so she'll give half to it. Then, she tears off a piece of fried chicken and starts waving it in front of it. The cat then widens its eyes in surprise and quickly jumps to grab it. Shusha is surprised by its reaction and asks what it's doing and why it suddenly jumped on her. Soon she wonders what's happening while the cat attacks her. And well, Shusha slips and falls to the ground along with her precious coffee. Suddenly, the black cat jumps on her, who remains lying on the ground looking at the sky, and runs away. Shortly after, she complains that it's crazy because she didn't do anything to it. Then, she looks at her only source of energy spilled on the ground and curses, outraged by that situation. And well, now Wu Shi is broke. But soon after, our protagonist says that it's enough to scrape off the parts that touch the ground and that it's still edible. Then she burps and says that the part that fell into the coffee stuck a lot. Now, back at her apartment, two men unload goods in front of the sidewalk. She stretches in her chair in her dark and messy room. Yawning, she complains that the sun is up and wonders if she should finally sleep. Then, Shersher throws herself on the bed, covering herself with a blanket, and says it's so hot, commenting that cozy feeling after playing until almost passing out from exhaustion is the best thing in the world. Next, Shusha drops her phone and says she will sleep immediately and snuggles in her bed. Suddenly, someone knocks on her door. Startled, she screams and gets out of bed, and panting, she starts speaking incomprehensible words. And looking out the window, she comments that it's all quiet outside and wonders if the noise was coming from inside the apartment. Opening her bedroom door, Shusha complains that no one there understands the concept of time and asks who starts drilling at 9 in the morning. Back in her room, she complains that she only slept for 2 hours and says that those people don't know how hard it is to fall asleep. Irritated, our protagonist repeatedly shouts for them to stop the noise, but soon after someone starts laughing non-stop. Shusha wonders who the idiot laughing is. Then she leaves her apartment, while the laughter near the hallway doesn't stop. She complains, irritated, that her damn neighbors know very well that the walls are thin, but still leave the door wide open. Then, furious, she heads to the other apartment, claiming she will teach those neighbors some manners. But upon arriving, she encounters a suspicious-looking couple drinking in a dark room. Confused, they curse her under their breath. Shusha's eyes widen in surprise at the situation. Then, she smiles timidly and says, "Excuse me?" But soon she runs out of the apartment in terror, while her neighbors continue to curse her non-stop. Shusha hurriedly descends the building's fire escape, panting, saying she almost lost her life and that the guy looked terrifying. As she walks down the street, she complains that she never noticed how thin the building's walls were and that the people living there were strange, concluding that cheap places always have their reasons. Then, she decides to take a walk until things calm down in the building. Suddenly, two women start fighting next to her. One woman asks if they hadn't told her not to feed the cats there. Shusha is startled and asks what's going on. Meanwhile, the woman in yellow complains that she can't sleep at night after work because of the noise. But the burly woman asks what's wrong with giving a little food to those poor creatures, claiming it's a matter of life or death for them. Soon, the woman in yellow asks why she has to feed them in front of her house and says that if she cares so much, she should take them home and feed them there. Then, the woman tells Shusha to come over for a second. Startled, our protagonist wonders if she's really talking to her. The woman, realizing she just came out of the apartment, asks her to say something about it. She then asks if our protagonist has dark circles under her eyes from not being able to sleep because of the cats, and claims that her dark circles are almost reaching her nostrils. Then, the burly woman questions if she's really saying it's okay to let those poor angels starve to death. Shusha stammers but says nothing. The woman in yellow asks if she lives in the apartment and asks her to confirm how unbearably loud the noise is. Shusha agrees, but soon starts stammering, unsure how to proceed. But suddenly, she wonders why she's getting involved in this situation, as she's already irritated from lack of sleep and now stuck in the middle of it. Then, she decides she needs to say something. Soon, Shusha coughs, clears her throat, and introduces herself as Guy Baksun, threatening the cave woman, saying that this time, she won't show mercy. But the the burly woman grabs the woman in yellow by the hair, angrily asking if she thinks words aren't enough anymore. Then she threatens her, saying she'll split her little head in half. In panic, the woman in yellow grabs the burly woman's arm, screaming in pain and begging her to let go. Suddenly, someone breaks a bottle on the ground. Soon, the burly woman turns and looks. The two drunks are coming out of the apartment. Then, the drunk neighbor complains about the noise and asks them to be quiet, as he's in a bad mood. With that, our protagonist takes the opportunity to get out of there. Shusha sighs in relief. Panting, she stops at the corner. Soon, she complains that she hasn't run in years and feels like she's going to throw up, saying the neighborhood is insane and wondering if this is really a developed country in the 21st century. Then, Shusha declares that when she wins the lottery, the first thing she'll do is move out of there, as the place is horrible, and says she wants to live in a nice neighborhood, a spacious place with a beautiful view where she can start her mornings gracefully under the sunlight. Soon, she clasps her hands in front of her face and begs God, if he really exists, to let her win free money every month. And well, now our 26-year-old protagonist has become a devout believer. Then, she says it's finally quiet, and tiptoes into her apartment, making no noise. Now, inside a bus, a woman hears the announcement that they are approaching the Makjongdong Community Center and says she needs to get off. Then she gets off the bus and decides to check the map and celebrates having made it. Soon after, she comments that getting around has become extremely easy these days, thanking God for it. Sometime later, Shisha's phone vibrates as she continues watching videos on her computer. Yes, she's become addicted to watching cat videos. Then she complains that she's broke, can't even play games, and all she can do is browse YouTube. Soon she checks the time on her computer and says it's the day she receives her allowance, but she asks where her mother is, while noticing the unusual commotion of her neighbors in the middle of the day. Then Shusha sighs and says that considering she was bored, it worked out perfectly. Soon she gets up and says the vibe of the day is seductive, but suddenly that woman stops in front of her door, room 303, and wonders where she wrote down the password. Then she opens the door, and exhausted, Shusha's mother comments that she just wanted to stop by to see how her daughter was doing. And well, there was her daughter, in a completely messy room, touching herself while imagining things and asking an imaginary someone to stop touching her. After seeing this whole scene, her mother is speechless. Soon she calls her, and Shishi panics when she sees who suddenly appeared in her room. Her mother is happy to see she's okay, and sighs in relief, but Shishi asks her mother when she arrived. Then, her mother yells at her to stop it, as it's annoying, and curses her, telling her to come down immediately, and our protagonist screams as she gets slapped on the back. After that, her mother laughs and asks if that place is suitable for humans, and complains that there are dirty clothes and trash everywhere, calling her daughter the princess of trash. Shisha says she usually cleans everything, and claims her mother just happened to show up on the day she hadn't cleaned. But her mother says it's better this way, and is shocked to see the water stains in the bathroom, saying even a ghost could come out of there. And she says that if she continues living like this, no man will want to marry her, but she's surprised to notice 2 toothbrushes, questioning if her daughter is finally dating someone. But against her expectations, our protagonist says she just replaced hers and left the old one to throw away later. Then, her mother tells her to throw it away immediately. Her mother complains that the floor is sticky. Then, she tells our protagonist to wash the cloth, saying she can't live like this and that they need to clean everything. Shusha complains that her mother is very annoying, but says she'll take care of it later. But with a frightening smile, her mother says she'll look for the mop immediately. The young woman cleans the window frame and soon tells her she's done. But her mother asks if she really cleaned and tells her to clean again. Shisha mutters something as she puts the clothes in the closet, while her mother scolds her, telling her not to pile all the clothes like that. Later, the girl puts the trash in plastic bags but is scolded again, hearing that she needs to separate the recyclables, and is asked if she thinks trash bags are free. After that, she scrubs the floor with a cloth, already exhausted, but her mother insists she must scrub properly, explaining that if she sleeps without doing it, she'll breathe in all that dust. But unable to take it anymore, Shusha throws herself on the floor. And finally, her mother observes that the place is finally starting to look like it's inhabited by people. Soon, she tells her daughter to get up. Murmuring, Shusha turns her face. Her mother asks if she's still dedicated to what she said she would do after quitting her job, and asks if she mentioned something about writing. Shishi says yes, and then she says that if she keeps trying, she'll get some results. But her mother, somewhat apathetic, asks if that's really what she wants, but soon hands her something. She asks what it is. Her mother says it's her allowance, and our protagonist exclaims that her jaw almost dropped. Then, the old woman says she just wanted to see how she was while giving her the money, and says she needs to leave, as she spent the whole time helping her clean everything. Now, on the sidewalk, she sure wishes her mother a safe trip home, and her mother tells her to make sure she works hard before she marries her off. And as she returns, our protagonist laughs as she takes off her shoes. Soon after, back in her room, she starts smelling the money, saying she missed that sweet smell, claiming she'll deposit it in her bank account soon. But before she can enjoy that moment, someone knocks on her door. The person outside asks for permission and tells her to open the door, saying they're her neighbor. He says he heard everything that was happening earlier. Meanwhile, on a bus, her mother thinks it will take 3 hours to get home and decides to take a nap on the way. Then her neighbor asks if she thinks he doesn't know what's going on inside her apartment. Then he knocks on the door again. Meanwhile, Shusha wonders what's going on and why her neighbor is suddenly acting like that. Soon, she wonders if it's because of the noise she made against the wall while touching herself. And well, our protagonist says she never thought about what she would do if someone came knocking on her door. Pretending not to be home, Shusha wonders how she should act, but soon remembers something she saw online about resolving disputes between neighbors and quickly starts reading a story about noise complaints between floors, while the knocks on the door continue insistently. So, determined, she slowly opens the door, laughing strangely and saying absurd things about dancing with a knife and missing prison food. Yes, her brilliant idea was to pretend to be crazy. However, upon opening the door, she comes face to face with a familiar figure, the woman in the yellow shirt she had met earlier, who looks at her in surprise and asks if she's the same girl with dark circles from before. She's sure still trying to recognize her, looks at her intently, until suddenly, the woman with sharp teeth asks to talk, and at that moment, the young woman's eyes widen, finally realizing who was really standing in front of her. Before any words could escape, Shusha slams the door in the visitor's face, backing away while trying to process if that woman was really who she thought she was. On the other side, the blonde complains indignantly for being interrupted. Meanwhile, our protagonist quickly moves away and hides inside the apartment, muttering to herself that this method only works with strangers, but soon realizes she couldn't avoid the situation forever. Gathering courage, she opens the door again and finds her neighbor with her arms crossed. The blonde doesn't waste time and states that everyone should follow proper etiquette, adding that, living there, Shusha should already know that the building's soundproofing was terrible, without a way out. The young woman tries to justify herself, saying it wasn't quite like that, but her neighbor quickly retorts, questioning what she meant by that, stating that she heard noise coming from her apartment, including slaps and chaos. In response, Shusha denies everything, assuring that she doesn't even have a boyfriend, but the moment she makes that statement, her eyes widen as she realizes what she just said. Sweating cold, her mind goes into conflict, pondering whether she should make up that she has a boyfriend and that the love sounds were too loud, or admit that she has no one and that she watches adult videos alone at full volume. While her mind works desperately, her neighbor just turns her face and stares at her, assistant. Then, the neighbor says she needs to go but warns that if the noise returns, she won't let it slide. Shusha watches her as she walks away and, furious, thinks that she was the one who made noise first. And questioning why she's being scolded, she curses the bitch in the yellow shirt and tells herself that next time she'll teach her a lesson. With that in mind, she slams the door hard, making the blonde look back. But soon after, our protagonist leans against the door, sighing and complaining about her bad luck. Now, back in her natural habitat, Shusha picks up the money her mother left on the floor. Then, she closes the curtains, leaving the room completely immersed in darkness, and finally adjusts the blanket and grumbles that she's too stressed and that the best thing to do is just sleep. Burying her face in the mattress, Shusha decides she'll go to the bank the next morning, believing that way she'll avoid any encounter with her neighbor. And the next morning, she leaves her apartment thinking about it. As she walks, she comments to herself how complicated the previous day was, but looking at her full wallet, she feels more excited. However, suddenly the sound of a sniffle beside her catches her attention, and without thinking, she looks to the side, only to realize that, to her misfortune, it was exactly who she wanted to avoid the most, her neighbor, who was sitting on the ground, with a bruised face and a dejected expression. Then, the blonde, with teary eyes, calls out to Shishi and asks why everyone abandons her. And although hesitant, our protagonist approaches, but can't help but grimace when she notices the strong smell of alcohol coming from her. Shishi looks at the blonde and asks if she really stayed in that state until morning, receiving as an answer a sniffle followed by an unexpected outburst. The woman starts complaining, saying that this was already the 4th breakup of the year and that her boyfriend, that ballless bastard, accused her of being emotionally needy. Not knowing what to say, our protagonist just admits that she doesn't understand much about love, but that seems to stimulate the blonde even more, who starts thinking out loud, saying that the noise she heard that afternoon must have been Shusha's adventure, stating with a smile that she definitely knows how to have fun. Then, as if nothing had happened, the blonde asks Shushi's age, revealing that she's 22. Somewhat reluctant Reluctantly, our protagonist replies that she's 26, but before she can walk away, the woman introduces herself as Cha Yojin and asks her name. Thinking quickly, Shi lies and says her name is Guy Baek's son, which leads Yojin to comment that she finds her surname very interesting. Timidly, Shi agrees and tries to end the conversation, saying she needs to go somewhere, but Yojin reacts desperately, shouting and begging her not to leave her alone. In a sudden move, the blonde hugs her, leaving Shi completely confused and scared, and before she can understand the situation, the unthinkable happens. Yojin, without warning, starts vomiting on our protagonist's sweatshirt, turning an already uncomfortable moment into something even worse. While vomiting, Yojin begs Shi not to leave her, but our protagonist, disgusted and irritated, kicks her away. An old man passing by watches the scene, confused, while Shi curses the blonde, clearly furious. Then, embarrassed, she runs away while Yojin remains on the ground, apologizing nonstop. During the run, Shi covers her face with the hood of her sweatshirt, trying to go unnoticed, but hears a child pointing at her and telling her mother that she pooped through her stomach. Finally arriving home, Shi puts the sweatshirt in the washing machine, trying to forget the embarrassing episode, and prepares instant noodles for lunch. After eating, she lets out a burp and declares that flavor saved her day. Lying in her chair, she comments that the inventor of instant ramen should receive a Nobel Peace Prize. Soon after, checking her phone, she notices that thanks to her mother's efforts, her account balance has increased, and that makes her feel confident that something good might happen that day. Shi then comments to herself that that feeling of fullness is amazing, and, sitting in front of the computer, confidently declares that she should now be able to write. Soon after, she enthusiastically types the title of her work, The Man Who Deserves a Beating. Proudly, she, or rather Guy Baek's son, as she presents herself artistically, states that she's about to create the greatest masterpiece of all time. However, as soon as she finishes the sentence, she abandons the computer, throwing herself on the floor while playing with her phone, muttering that she's too full after eating ramen and can't concentrate, also changing her mind by complaining that the inventor of ramen should be arrested. Stretching on the floor, our protagonist begins to reflect, remembering that it's been over 2 years since she quit her job to dedicate herself to writing, but that, until now, she hasn't written anything significant, something that couldn't continue like that. Determined, she reaffirms to herself that, no matter what happens, she will never return to a corporate job. At that moment, the flashback begins. Exactly 4 years ago, Shi appears surprised, showing her phone to her mother while announcing, radiant, that she was called for an interview on Tuesday. Hearing this, her parents exchange glances. Then, in front of the Agma Ice Cream Company building, Shi tells her father she's going ahead, and he, still in the car, advises her to answer the interview questions appropriately, emphasizing that, no matter what they ask, she should always give an answer. He continues, comparing society to a battlefield and stating that she must face it head-on with the determination of a soldier. Our protagonist tries to argue, but her father firmly interrupts her, ordering her not to refute the words of the Almighty. Already inside the building, Shi holds her phone nervously and wonders why the interviewer hasn't arrived yet, considering it's already time. Observing the empty room, she finds it strange that it's a weekday and yet there's no one there, questioning if the company is always like that. The next moment, the door opens and someone comes out of it, making Shi instinctively shrink in her seat. The man, who appears to be the interviewer, apologizes for the delay and justifies that he just returned from field work, while our protagonist begins to observe him attentively. Then, the interviewer greets her and introduces himself as No Yejun, a representative of the company, while Shi clasps her hands, feeling nervous. Sitting face to face, he prepares to start the interview, and our protagonist observes that he's quite different from what she imagined, as she expected someone more serious. But he looks more like the neighborhood uncle. Then, suddenly, No Yejun asks if that sauce on her face is from tteokbokki, and caught by surprise, she startles, but, realizing, responds embarrassed that it is. Then, he analyzes her resume and comments that there's nothing special in it, explaining that her academic credentials are just the minimum necessary to meet the recruitment requirements. Additionally, he points out that she has no experience and is very young, stating that, with that background, it would be difficult to get a job at other companies. He continues, explaining that most employees at her level tend to quit after getting the hang of the job, which represents a big risk for any company. Shi then thinks that he seems to have no intention of hiring her and wonders what she can do to reverse the situation, as if she's eliminated like that, her parents will certainly be worried. Thinking about that, she feels a tightness in her chest as she remembers her daily routine, always playing on the computer while her mother, worried, constantly asked what she would do with her life. Back at the interview, she feels she needs to prove she can deliver on her promises and, with determination, states that she won't run away. But then, suddenly, she starts laughing as she remembers the joke she formulated in her head, that she wouldn't run away because she's too slow. No Yejun silently watches her as she, realizing she couldn't control herself, panics and thinks everything is over. However, the interviewer ignores the episode and continues with the interview, asking what her ideal annual salary would be, as she must have a number in mind. Trying to formulate an answer, Shishu hesitates, and thus the interview comes to an end. Sometime later, she comments that 2 weeks have passed without a response and concludes that she never had a chance to be hired. Suddenly, her father shouts from the hallway, telling her to stop making so much noise as life is full of setbacks, and then starts a motivational speech saying he went to 20 places a day just to find a job. Shishu watches him as he continues, exclaiming with fervor, "Shriveled body, crushed bones, return, unshakable will!" Зрение пока нетерпеливое, она начинает толкать его из комнаты. However, suddenly, she stops and tells him to look at something quickly. Then, excited, she turns her phone to him and celebrates seeing that she got the job, as the company asked her to show up for work. Now back at the company, No Ye-jun asks if she has any questions about the job, and Shi says yes, while thinking nervously that she was so tense she couldn't even read the contract properly. After a long time, Shishu was finally away from her parents' house. With a sigh of relief, she celebrates finishing organizing her apartment, exclaiming that it's still hard to believe that place is really hers, as it seemed strange. Observing the landscape through the window, she comments that the neighborhood has a retro vibe, but that overall, it seems like a nice place. Thinking about her first day of work, she decides to set the alarm to make sure she's not late. Lying in bed, she states that she'll watch some YouTube videos before going to bed early. Night falls over the city. The next morning, she wakes up in a panic, shouting that she's going to be late and trying to understand why the alarm didn't go off, until she realizes that, ironically, it was she who turned them off. Desperate, she runs through the streets calling a taxi. As soon as she arrives in front of the Agma building, she celebrates not being late and considers it a success. Still panting, she runs through the hallways, mentally noting that, upon opening that door, she will officially start her first day of work. But as she tries to turn the doorknob, she's startled to notice the door doesn't move and questions what's happening. Suddenly, someone on the other side opens the door, and Sure screams in fright when a voice asks who she is. With her heart racing, she hurries to introduce herself as the new employee who was supposed to start that day. The man in front of her introduces himself as Kang Juk-young, an employee of the company, and she, somewhat awkwardly, greets him. He then calls her, saying there's still some time before work hours and that he can quickly show her the company's routine. But before they can continue, he points out something that needs to be resolved first, and Shi agrees. The next moment, as she takes a closer look at the man in front of her, she's startled to notice the top of his head, mentally commenting on his hair. Meanwhile, Kang Juk-young grumbles about the slow internet and says it makes him want to break the computer. Soon after, he announces he's done and calls Shi to show her seat, asking her name. She replies that her name is Baek's son, and he observes that it's a very unique name. As they walk, Juk-young explains that the company is still new and therefore has few employees. Then, he points to her desk, and Shi immediately comments that it's incredibly dirty. He admits they forgot to clean it after the previous employee quit and offers to help her clean it. During the conversation, he mentions that the representative often works in the field and is rarely in the office, while the team leader will arrive soon. He also advises her to use the first day to get used to the environment and not to get nervous. While cleaning the desk, Juk-young questions where he should start teaching her. Shi, on the other hand, thinks to herself that, despite the initial anxiety, the work there doesn't seem so bad. The atmosphere isn't overly rigid, and she feels she'll be able to perform well. Kang Juk-young comments that she can consider that as the bulk of the work and that, whenever she completes a task, she'll need to write a report. The next moment, he clears his throat and announces the arrival of the team leader, greeting him formally. The team leader observes Juk-young and, with a slight smile, comments that he seems to be in a good mood that day, questioning if something good happened or if by chance, his appearance is funny. Amid this conversation, his eyes fall on Shi, and, confused, he wonders to himself who that girl might be. Without delay, Juk-young takes the initiative and introduces her as the new employee who will be working with them. Approaching a bit closer, he whispers to Shi, explaining that this is Baek, the team leader, and suggests she greet him quickly. Without hesitation, she introduces herself politely, expressing that she hopes to count on his guidance. Suddenly, Baek's eyes widen, completely surprised. In his mind, a scene unfolds. He imagines himself next to Shu in a moment of pure family harmony, as if an unexpected destiny had brought them together. But he quickly shakes his head, dismissing such thoughts, and changes the tone of his speech, saying that even the birds seem to sing love songs in the sky, and that the grass on the ground grows more vibrant. However, without giving time for any reaction, he abruptly changes the subject and orders her to start working. Juk-young, who watches everything attentively, senses the strange atmosphere, and without hesitation, hesitation, calls Shi to speak with him privately. She agrees and approaches, asking if there's something he wants to tell her. In a more serious tone, Juk-young states that this isn't something you say to someone on their first day of work, but that, nonetheless, he believes she should quit. Without understanding, Shi questions what he means by that, but before she can respond, he takes a cigarette, asking if she smokes, while apologizing, saying it's just a habit. Soon after, he continues, stating that this company isn't exactly the best place to work. He then questions if she noticed his hair falling out and claims that it's a direct result of the job. Without wasting time, Shi asks why he's still there if that's the situation. Without hesitation, Kang Juk-young explains that he's stuck due to a 2-year funded program with no possibility of leaving before the deadline, adding that he also has his own reasons for staying. Without beating around the bush, he mentions that no newcomer has lasted more than 3 months at this company, which is why he decided to warn her from the start. Amid all this, Shi mentally questions why such information isn't shared on the first day. The next moment, her eyes widen with a sudden suspicion, wondering if this could be some kind of test to evaluate newcomers. Her mind quickly imagines Kang Juk-young and Go Baek whispering, while commenting that the new recruit seems to have no loyalty, pointing out that her eyes narrowed the moment she heard something negative about the company. Convinced of her theory, Shi concludes that this is nothing more than a strategy to eliminate anyone who isn't ready for the long haul. And then, completely certain of her interpretation, the crazy girl starts laughing at him, stating that she's always 100 steps ahead. Shi assures that she can handle any situation, confidently stating that she was born to work there. Kang Juk-young, showing regret for what he said earlier, asks that they get along, and the two shake hands. The gesture surprises the girl, who is startled by the unexpected touch. 3 months pass, and at the Agma Company office, Shi grumbles about the unusual tasks they keep assigning her, recalling that the last time they made her compare prices of domestic water purifier rentals. Dissatisfied, she complains that she was hired as a graphic designer, but now she has to review official documents, fearing that a mistake could lead to legal problems. Considering asking Juk-young for help, she acknowledges that he seems reliable, but sees him busy with other demands. While working on the computer, Go Baek watches her uneasily until he decides to approach, asking if she's having trouble with the documents. Startled, Shi reacts with an involuntary scream. Her boss, surprised, questions if she sees him as a monster or something. Shi replies that she startles easily, trying to disguise the discomfort. The crazy boss just smiles, saying he only wanted to help, while approaching the computer, questioning what the problem is and asking to take a look. Hesitant, she explains that the terms attached to the official document are a bit hard to understand. Go Baek focuses his attention on the document, but the next moment his eyes widen and he quickly changes his stance, stating that she should be able to handle it on her own. He argues that it's part of the learning process and that it will be worth it in the end. Shi, observing his reaction, realizes that he doesn't even know how to help her. In her thoughts, she complains that the guy is always useless, getting irritated as she remembers that all he does is send random messages after work hours, as if she's only there to keep him from getting bored. Frustrated, she still wonders why he never reviews anything, as he always says he's busy and just tells her to send the documents, only to make her redo them later. Our protagonist sighs, stating that she's seriously considering quitting, but before she can continue complaining, Kang Juk-young approaches and asks if she's busy, requesting her help to organize some files, to which Shi, still focused on the official document, replies that she's busy reviewing it, but says he can leave the files with her. Juk-young comments that it's quite difficult and that he himself has had to deal with this task, but Shi, somewhat embarrassed, says that after a few times, it ends up getting easier. Then he smiles and thanks her for doing a great job, stating that thanks to her, he has less to worry about, leaving our protagonist embarrassed but satisfied as she realizes that being appreciated for her work isn't so bad after all. Meanwhile, her sick boss, Go Baek, watches the interaction between the two with a dreadful expression, feeling an absurd jealousy as he sees Juk-young joking about his hair finally growing and asking if Shi wants to take a look. But before the conversation can extend, the office door suddenly opens, and the company's supreme boss enters, asking cheerfully how everyone is. They turn to greet him, and Shi waves politely, while the boss apologizes for always being out of the office, explaining that he's been traveling for work lately. Feeling a bit guilty, the jerk tries to compensate, announcing a company dinner the next day to celebrate how well our protagonist has been adapting to the job. Meanwhile, Go Baek watches the scene with a not-so-good expression, thinking that Kang Juk-young is a cunning dog and stating to himself that he knows exactly how to deal with men like him. those who belittle women. Determined, the crazy guy adjusts his suit, convinced that this will be the perfect night to confess his feelings. A short time later, at the Samyang Ribs restaurant, the boss raises his glass and asks for a toast, thanking everyone for joining this small company and declaring that from that moment on, Baek-sun can consider herself part of the family. Shi, without much ceremony, turns and downs her drink in one go, while Go Bacon tries to find the right moment to talk to her, but realizes it's difficult and concludes he needs to act soon. However, before he can say anything, our protagonist lets out a loud burp, drawing everyone's attention in the restaurant. Meanwhile, Go Bacon watches Shi with admiration and concludes that she's different from other women. In his mind, he recalls the various relationships he's had and states that Shi doesn't compare to those ugly women who only cared about appearances. However, his mental journey is interrupted when our protagonist calls Kang Juk-young, asking why he isn't drinking yet and inviting him for a drink. Kang Juk-young, without much enthusiasm, politely declines, justifying that if he drinks, he won't be able to eat as much meat. The comment only increases Go Bacon's jealousy, who stares at the two with a dreadful expression. Soon after, completely drunk, Shi can't take it and vomits right there. To everyone's surprise, her boss, instead of being bothered, praises her alcohol tolerance and asks if she often drinks a lot with friends. Still a bit dizzy, Shi replies that she doesn't have many friends and that, in fact, she only drinks occasionally with her father. Unable to hold back his frustration, Go Bacon lets out a mocking laugh and tells her to stop pretending to be innocent, claiming that she's surely dated 100 guys. Finally, looking directly at her, he asks what kind of men she prefers. Go Bacon watches Shi sitting next to Juk-young and, with a convinced smile, asks if he's her type. Confused, she questions what he's talking about, but he insists, saying that, as expected of someone young, she probably likes handsome guys. Proudly, he adds that when he was young, he was also handsome. Before he can continue boasting, Kang Juk-young interrupts him, warning that he might end up choking on his food, but their boss cuts the conversation and complains that everyone is acting strange, as it's been a while since they had a company dinner. Meanwhile, our favorite Baldy grumbles in thought, irritated for always ending up involved in the uncomfortable situations his team leader causes whenever there are female employees around. At the same moment, Go Bacon throws a jab, saying that instead of worrying about others, Juk-young should worry about his grandmother. Upon hearing this, Kang Juk-young's eyes widen, visibly furious. The next day, at the Ogma company, Go Bacon takes a deep breath, frustrated, while Shi, focused on her computer, finds the heavy atmosphere in the office strange. The argument that started the previous night continued to intensify. In front of the restaurant, Kang Juk-young looked at Shi and stated that her internship period at the company had ended there. Curious, she asked what he planned to do after quitting, but he just sighed and replied that he wasn't sure yet, but that he needed to find another job as soon as possible. Lowering his head, he questioned if she would continue working there. Shi reflected for a moment before admitting that the team leader could be a bit annoying, but soon added that, despite that, she could earn money without worrying, proudly recounting that the last time she visited her hometown, she managed to pay for dinner for her parents. Then her mind was filled with memories of that special moment. Her family gathered at the table, her father savoring the food and commenting excitedly that the dinner seemed even tastier because it was paid for by his daughter. With a smile, he asked his wife if she didn't think the same. And, seeing the happiness and carefreeness of her parents, Shi felt truly useful for the first time. Back to the present, she looked at Juk-young and stated that, although there were moments when she didn't feel like working, she thought she'd be fine. About 9 months later, Baek-sun complained of back pain, feeling the weight of overtime that had already lasted 15 consecutive days. While massaging her own neck, she was called by her boss, who asked her to check something for him. He soon asked if she had checked the content correctly, and, although acknowledging that she was overloaded due to the reduced number of employees, reinforced that he needed her to pay more attention. Grabbing more papers, Shi listened as he complained that he wasn't asking for anything impossible, mentioning that Juk-young used to handle everything alone. With that, he walked away, leaving another stack of documents and ordering her to organize everything before leaving. Sighing, Shi confirmed she would do it and apologized. Late at night, exhausted and sitting at her desk, she grumbled about having to work overtime once again, something that had been happening frequently since Juk-young left. Grabbing her phone, her eyes widened as she saw it was already past 3 in the morning again. Finally ending her shift, she left the building and hailed a taxi on the street, telling the driver she wanted to go to the Makjangdong Community Center. As the taxi drove through the quiet streets of the early morning, the driver began to complain about the country's politics, saying they were ruining everything and asking if our protagonist didn't think the same. However, looking in the rearview mirror, he noticed that Shi had already succumbed to fatigue and was sleeping soundly in the the back seat. A short time later, he slammed on the brakes and shouted that they had arrived, waking her up with a start. Still drowsy, she blinked a few times, trying to understand where she was, while the driver complained that he would lose customers for waiting so long. The next morning, Shusha woke up in her room, stretching lazily and cracking her toes. Feeling the weight of the previous day, she grumbled that she had absolutely no desire to go to work and wondered why meteors didn't fall to Earth at opportune moments like this. Suddenly, the sound of a vibration interrupted her rambling. Picking up her cell phone, she answered without even looking at the caller ID and asked who it was. But upon unlocking the screen, her eyes widened as she saw a message from Baek, informing her that he was at her door to pick her up for work. She then wondered what that guy was doing there so early, and more than that, how he knew where she lived. Then, irritated, she tried to think of the best way to respond. Soon, she sent a message saying that she had already left early and that he could go ahead. After that, she left the apartment laughing to herself, convinced of her own intelligence, stating that with a brain like that, she would certainly get into Harvard if she studied. However, as she went downstairs, she ran into Baek standing in front of her house. He stared at her and asked if she really hated him to the point of lying to avoid him. Surprised, Shusha tried to justify herself, but at the same time started to question if he had a screw loose for still being there. Then Baek insisted that if she simply told the truth, he would stop bothering her and could forget his feelings for her. Confused, Shusha hesitated and repeated his words, trying to process the situation. Suddenly, she brought her hands to her face, feeling nervousness take over, and lowered her head, stammering without knowing how to react. Soon, Shusha sincerely apologized to Baek, but he, although saying that everything was okay and that she didn't need to explain anything else, let his hurt show through as he got in the car and left. While driving, his anger overflowed, and he cursed her, accusing her of being superficial and obsessed with appearances, promising through tears that he would ruin her. Since then, he transformed the work environment into a minefield, deliberately making Shushi's life difficult. One day, she tried to deliver a business plan, but was rudely interrupted by Baek, who impatiently told her to wait because he was busy. His hostile posture only confirmed that he had made her tasks even more challenging. Tired and alone in the office at night, Shusha worked on her computer until she was startled by a sudden fright, raising her hands reflexively from exhaustion. At the same instant, Baek opened the company door, commented that there was no one else around, and announced that he would turn off the lights, demonstrating his energy-saving spirit. Shusha, watching him act as if she wasn't there, started to feel completely ignored. Later, in a private conversation with the boss, she vented about the difficulties she faced at work, and he, with unexpected calmness, promised to talk to Baek, explaining that he was more sensitive than he appeared, and suggesting that Shusha try to understand him better. At home, drunk and revolted, she looked at a can of beer and declared that its name would now be Baek, before cursing the boss and telling him to go to hell. After a quick shower while drying her hair, she sighed deeply, overtaken by melancholic thoughts. Lying in bed, Shusha wondered how long she would live like this, resigned to the idea that unless she won the lottery, her life would continue to be monotonous, limited by her basic education and the lack of any impressive professional or academic experience. Soon, Shusha came across an advertisement about popular online novel authors and, curious, wondered if it was possible to make a lot of money writing. This reminded her of her childhood, when she was talented at writing essays and even won a municipal prize of 500,000 won, about $360. However, she scoffed at the idea, saying that at that time, writing articles didn't make sense. Distracted, she accidentally poked her eye with her cell phone, letting out a groan of pain. Later, she received a message from Baek asking her to confirm the file she had sent and complaining about 2 typos, emphasizing that not even children would make such mistakes and ordering her to correct and resend it immediately. The next day, determined to change her situation, Shusha informed Representative No Yejun that she wanted to resign. He, surprised, questioned the reason, and she explained that her health was deteriorating and that she needed a break. Although regretful, the representative asked her to work until the end of the next month. When she left the room, Shusha was surprised by Baek calling her name, which immediately made her shudder. Soon, Shusha was startled to hear Baek start yelling at her about the messages sent the night before, questioning whether that kind of thing was appropriate to say to a boss, calling her an idiot. He even asked, threateningly, if she wanted to break her teeth and if she had forgotten that he was her boss, and, moreover, older than her. Shusha, however, laughed nervously, suggesting that maybe her cat had accidentally pressed the buttons, and with a defiant tone, told him to scold her as much as he wanted, as she had already decided that she would resign in a month. After leaving, reflecting on her words, Shusha started to run, and while trying to mentally escape from that situation, stated that if she continued like this, she would spend the rest of her life trapped in a company like that. Determined to change, she told herself that she would try something different, because anything was better than her current situation. Later, upon opening a box, she found a book titled High School Graduates Can Do It Too, an introduction to story plot writing, and saw in it a new possibility. Now, back in the present, Shi is sitting on the floor, laughing while watching videos on her cell phone. But looking at herself in the mirror, her expression changed as she realized how much fat her belly had gained, wondering when that happened. Shi wondered if she had overeaten just because she had received unexpected money, but soon concluded that it didn't matter. After all, she wasn't showing her body to anyone. Wearing an old sweatshirt, she decided to try exercising, as she had been feeling a little insecure and believed that this was the least she should do for herself. With renewed determination, she began her workout full of enthusiasm, but after running a few meters, she already felt difficulty breathing. Panting, she decided to walk, remembering that she had heard somewhere that overdoing it on the first day could decrease the chances of maintaining the habit. As she walked, a delicious smell invaded her nose, and she commented to herself that perhaps she had become more sensitive after the effort. Feeling her hunger grow, she quickened her pace to return home. But as she approached, she came across something unexpected in front of her, freezing in place. Suddenly, 3 girls started walking towards Shi, and she, frightened, wondered what to do in the face of that group with such strange looks. Looking closer, even the objects they held seemed suspicious, and with her 26 years of life experience, Shi was absolutely certain that the only way to escape was to walk as if she didn't care about their presence. However, her plan failed, and the girls approached her asking if, by any chance, she was a student, explaining that they were conducting a survey for a university project. They stated that they wouldn't ask any difficult questions and asked for just a few minutes of her time. Panicked, Shi cursed them mentally but tried to refuse, saying that she had an appointment. The girls insisted, promising that it would be quick, but Shi continued trying to escape, explaining that she really needed to leave. Despite this, they continued to insist, reducing the request to just 5 minutes. Suddenly, someone started running towards them, and while the girls turned to look, Shi, taking advantage of the opportunity, cursed them as tramps, asking them to let her go. One of the girls, irritated, replied that she was very vulgar. Suddenly, the same girl's eyes widened as she realized who was really running towards them. Without hesitation, she yelled for them to run because it was the Chihuahua. Shi, not understanding anything, wondered who this Chihuahua was. But before she could get an answer, Chahyojin appeared furious, yelling and demanding to know if she hadn't made it clear that she would kill them if they continued doing that. Impatiently, she questioned why they were still there and without wasting time, ordered them to return, as this time they would have no escape. Faced with the threat, the girls ran away as fast as possible. In the midst of the chaos, the crazy blonde, already tired, grumbled that she should have ripped all their mouths apart. Meanwhile, our protagonist began to identify her by observing her hair. Amidst the running, Yojin called her neighbor and in a casual tone asked how she was. Indignant, Shi yelled at her, wanting to know if she really didn't remember everything that happened last time. Yojin, confused, didn't understand the accusation, and, not knowing what it was about, asked what she had done. After all, as we all know, she was completely drunk that day. Trying to recover her memory, she put her hand on her head and struggled to remember what she had done. Looking at Shi's belly, Yojin finally remembered what she had done. Shock took over her face as she recalled that she had vomited on her. Without hesitation, she knelt down and began to apologize desperately, justifying that it was the drink's fault and begging for forgiveness. However, our protagonist maintained a serious expression and said that she couldn't simply forgive her, questioning if she had any idea how embarrassing it was to walk around like that. Before Shi could say anything else, Yeojin grabbed her clothes and, ignoring the tense atmosphere, completely changed the subject, asking if she was hungry. Then, she suggested that they eat fried chicken and assured her that, this time, she would pay. The mere idea of free food made Shi's eyes widen in surprise. In an instant, anger gave way to temptation, and without thinking twice, she decided that they could talk, asking Yojin to stand up. The blonde, excited, asked if that meant she was forgiven. Without answering directly, Shi just started walking beside her. On the way, Yojin said to leave the past behind and, curious, asked what Shi was doing there, explaining that she was returning home after another day of work at her part-time job. Slightly embarrassed, Shi admitted that she was going to exercise a little. Yojin, wasting no time, commented that she didn't seem to have gained weight, but our protagonist confessed that she had gained a little. In disbelief, the blonde denied it, but suddenly stopped talking, raised her hands, and began to analyze her own belly with a critical eye. At the same instant, she made an unexpected suggestion, assuring her that if she wanted, she could make her as thin as a bone. Without giving time for a response, she pulled her to run, warning that if she took too long, there would be no chicken for her. Frightened, Shusha tried to resist and asked for a minute to breathe, but Yojin didn't listen. A short time later, the blonde celebrated, satisfied, saying that Shusha ran better than expected, while the other leaned against the wall, coughing non-stop. Remembering the suffocation she had gone through, Shusha complained that she tasted blood in her throat, but Yeojin, not paying much attention, just warned that she would order the chicken and told her to wash up before coming in. At the same time, she asked where they would eat and suggested that it be in our protagonist's room. Panicked, Shusha immediately refused, stating that her room was off limits. However, Yojin insisted, smiling excitedly, and said that then they could wash up and go to her room, assuring her that she was very excited.